It's important to know when you should write your logic inside a before trigger or inside an after trigger. We have already seen some examples in this course where we were using the before trigger, but we haven't explored the after trigger so far. So let's learn what is the difference between these two types of events and what kind of logic should go in these triggers. Before triggers are used to update or validate record values before they are saved to the database. And here when we say records, these are the records on which the trigger is currently executing. So if you want to make some changes to these records or if you want to write some validation rules, then before trigger is the one where you should write your logic. And these records are in read-only mode in after trigger. So this means if you want to make some changes to these records inside an after trigger, we will not be able to do so and you will get an exception. But what if you want to make some changes to some related records? For example, let's say our trigger is on lead object, but we want to create a task related to a lead record. In that case, we should not write our logic inside the before trigger. Rather, we should go for an after trigger, because the after trigger only executes once your changes from before trigger are saved to the database. So if you are making some changes to lead fields and these fields value are being used inside your task as well, then in the after trigger you will get the updated values which you will not get inside the before trigger. So deciding between before and after is not a rocket science and it's very simple. First you write your trigger on the S object, and this S object can be your standard Salesforce objects or your custom objects. Then you simply ask a question to yourself. Do you need to make changes to other records? And here by other records I mean the records on which the trigger is not executing, or maybe the records from other S objects. If that is the case, then you should write your logic in after trigger. If not, then you should write your logic inside the before trigger. In most cases, we use before trigger because we only need to make changes to the current records on which trigger is executing. But in some cases, we go for after trigger as well, or a mix of both. So let's go back to our Salesforce org where we are going to see an example of an after trigger. So here in our lead trigger, I've got one more requirement which says once a lead record is created, then create a task related to that lead record, or let's call it a follow-up task, to check the lead status. And we are going to do it in our current lead trigger itself. So our requirement says that this particular logic should execute once a lead record is created. So this means we are talking about the insert event. And we already have the before insert event handled here, and we have it defined in our lead trigger events as well. But as I said, this trigger is executing on the lead S object and task is a separate S object. So our logic should go inside the after insert trigger. So first I'll add one more event here, which is after insert. Then I'm going to add one more when condition in my switch when statement, which will be after insert. Now do you notice how easy it is for us to maintain our trigger? We can clearly control each and every event in its own block. So now I'm going to iterate over the lead record so that I get all the values. So let's copy this for loop, and that's it. Here we should write our logic to create a task. So let's create a task here. I'm going to name it lead task. Here we need to give a subject to the task. Let's call it follow up on lead status, and that should be it. Let's insert this task. Let's also map our tasks to the current lead record. So it should be like what ID, and this should be equals to lead record dot ID. And then we can also define one more field value, which is who ID, and this can be equals to lead record dot owner ID. So that's it. Now let's give it a test. So let's go back to our Salesforce org Let's create a new task here. Let's give a company and then the lead status, which is already selected, and we already have a validation rule, so we need to select the industry as well. And let's click on save. And now we got an error and it says a DML exception insert failed. Oh, it's the who ID field that we are defining, which cannot be a user type, so I'm going to remove it. Let's remove it and save our code. Hopefully it should work now. Again we have got an error, so let me make some changes actually. And let's try it now. Okay, so now we are able to save our lead record. The reason why it was failing is because this who ID should be the lead record ID, where we were defining it under the what ID. So now if we take a look at our lead records and see the associated task, then you would find that we have a task here called follow up on lead status. So this part of logic should go inside the after insert trigger, because this lead record ID is not available inside the before insert event, because the lead record is not inserted at that time. So that's why when you deal with related records or other records inside a trigger, then you should always go for the after triggers.